Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I want to welcome everybody.
I think you need to speak
Speak
louder.
a little louder. Do we need that microphone after all?
Yeah, maybe.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. My name is Fatoumata Cisse, and I am a board member of the Milwaukee Muslim Women's Coalition. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome everybody to the center and to this panel discussion on Black history and its association with Muslim and Islam. The Milwaukee Muslim Women Association or Coalition every year organizes a function related to this, and we are very happy and privileged to have a distinguished panel that has agreed to come and have a discussion about Black Muslims in the diaspora in the world. This is very important. Muslims have been, Black people have been Muslims from the beginning of slavery. As some of the people that came from the western coast of Africa into America, the majority probably were Muslims, but got converted to other religions as they got here. But as time progressed, Islam has been reintroduced into our communities, and we are all living together as Muslims. It is a privilege and an honor to be able to talk about this openly and in concert with all the other Muslims all around the world, so that we can all get a feel of what it is really like to be a Black Muslim, especially in the United States of America. So without further ado, I would like to first thank Mona, who is the librarian who has organized this occasion. And she has worked really hard to put it together. She is the librarian of the Islamic Research Center, which is the biggest Muslim library in the state of Wisconsin. And there are books that could be checked out. People may check out books on Islam related topics. She had told me that behind me is a selection of books related to Islam and Black history. And those two can be checked out through the IRC, the Islamic Resource Center. So I would like to take the opportunity to allow everybody, starting with the panelists, to introduce themselves to the group before we get started. Welcome.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Imam Fahad Muhammad. I serve as the Imam for Masjid Sultan Muhammad and also the Director of Education for the Claire Muhammad School.
All right, my name is Burhan Clark. I chair the board at the Milwaukee Islamic Dawah Center, and I also run a company teaching basic medical training to companies around the community.
My name is Sumaya Clark. If you can tell, there is relation. This is my brother, so I'm excited about that. Let's see here, what do I do? I currently serve as an executive cabinet member for Milwaukee County Department of Health and Human Services. So I do public health, population health, government administration. And then I also have the opportunity to serve on several boards of local community organizations.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Basima Abdullah, and I am presently the principal at Claire Muhammad School, and this is my last year.
So she
ladies,
said. So she
ladies.
said, right.
No, that's it.
I'll figure something out.
Let some young person come in and take it.
So, Sister Basima,
Yes.
my understanding you will be moderating as well? Munasa? Oh, Brother Muhammad,
Sure,
I'm
all
sorry.
tomatoes over
Oh,
here.
so you were
Sure.
hiding over there,
Yes, I
so
was
you were
hiding.
hiding, okay.
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum, Mahdi. I'm here, like I said, to direct all your tomatoes if you don't like what's going on. But I was asked to step in and moderate, and so that's what I'll do. I was voluntold.
This is my middle son.
Mashallah, mashallah.
All right. Well, as we've all stated, we're here, and I think the most suiting thing to do is definitely open up in prayer, but also make sure that we pay homage while we're here. So the witness there is no God but Allah, merciful benefactor, merciful redeemer. We can all open up in a Fatiha. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Malik yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladhina an'amta 'alayhim ghayril maghdubi 'alayhim waladdallin. All right, so I greet you all with the words of peace. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
For those who may or may not be Muslim, I'm saying that just peace be upon you. And if it's more Sunni, I'll say what's up. So we have a few questions, as they've already stated their name, and a kind of a brief bio. I'm sure they've done so much more, but give them a minute, they'll tell you. So as we opened up, our first question we're going to go ahead and shoot out is, how do the struggles that you have been dealing with in the general Milwaukee community compared to the struggles you face within the general Muslim community? Are they similar or different? Anybody can take it.
All right. So, well, struggles. When we think about like struggles as far as the general community being Muslim, I was born in an interesting time. I mean, when I was young, there were really almost two types of Muslims. Either one, you were with the nation, or two, you were like a terrorist. Those were like those were like when you go to school. Those are the two things you sort of had, and me, being a Muslim who just follows Sunnah, who's not part of the nation, and generally not a terrorist. Also, it was an interesting place to sort of feel in between, where there consistently I felt times where I had to like educate people about like who I was, what Islam was, and sort of like work through automatic assumptions. And so the same way I would have assumptions that would be just kids from school or teachers or whatever else, I would have in some ways other sets of assumptions that Muslims would have towards me. So if I'm going somewhere, people would be, especially once I got a little older, people would assume like, oh, when did you become Muslim? Did you become Muslim in jail? Did you, like these would be like just different things that would be automatic assumptions sort of about you. So people would come up and wonder about like, my challenges with my family, if assuming that my family's all Christian, assuming like other things like this. So you feel, again, maybe a sense of almost independence in your Islam also, where instead of me always depending on other people to define my Islam as a group almost, I look at my Islam almost very personally. So there wasn't when someone's saying, are you, when did you become Muslim? What's going on? How are you, talking about your relationship with Islam, it would be something that I'd get pretty used to having to sort of explain, having to, start conversations almost, when really it was, and that can be sometimes fatiguing, but it's just a pretty common idea, I think, amongst a lot of Black Muslims, when you find yourself going different places, and those are probably just generally some of the first things.
Exactly the same.
Except
I was 18 when my mother converted, and she converted all of us. And it was through actually the Nation of Islam, and I think because my mom had been divorced a couple of times, when she changed our names legally, because I was 18, we had to go to court. I had to go to court with her. And it was different for the children, they just automatically would change it. But we had to testify and make sure we weren't changing our name to defraud or not pay bills. I thought that was interesting. But when she converted, it wasn't even a question, because my mother had been searching for my whole life. I have been baptized in just about every tent revival down the California coastline. So we knew the Bible in and out, but when my mother became Muslim, honestly, that was the first time I ever saw her with peace. So I get it both ways. I've had people say, "Oh, you look like Muslim. You dress like people in my country." I say, "Yeah, I'm Muslim." And then they don't believe you, so they say, "You know Muhammad? You know Allah?" I've had Muslims ask me to say Al-Fatiha because they didn't believe I was Muslim. And African Americans go the other route. Even a Caucasian Americans would say sometimes to me, "You seem like you're such an intelligent young woman. Why are you in that religion?" And I just say, "Because I'm an intelligent young woman." And they would always just be, but this is my 4th Clara Muhammad school that I've worked in. And I've always tried to keep the school within the community because we don't live isolated. Our children need to be able to deal with anybody and everybody. So I've always tried to interact in organizations. So when you talk about other organizations, since I've been in Milwaukee, I've worked with Harambe ever since we've been here. And we've had a couple of African American psychological, social, for mental health. We've always worked with them, but they never really stayed long. Most of the problems that we've had as an African American organization is really through banking. We've had where they would not respect it. I mean, we've been in business. This is our 50th year, technically. It's older than that, but they got incorporated. They first incorporated Clara Muhammad back in '72. So this is our 50th year at the end of this year. And we still have difficulty with contractors and getting loans from banks. And we've had banks tell us, work with us and say, "Oh yeah, you guys, you pay your bills, you're good, your standing is good, you don't owe anybody, you're good in the community," and then just drop off. And I don't know whether they don't want to tell us, but we had gotten a grant at one time from, it was a Bill Gates grant, but it was through Dr. Fuller in the Institute for the Transformation of Learning. It helped us get our high school on. And it was, we still don't know what we did, but at the end of the grant, they wanted us to make sure that we don't put on that we received the grant and that we don't use it in any of our brochures. It was like, nobody wants to be associated with us. What's up with that? So that's the kind of things that we've had to deal with with the school.
It reminds me when you talk about the struggle, especially like for the Dawah Center, and I think for another thing that we can have as a challenge in the Muslim community, and especially I would say African American Muslim community, is retention of good staff.
Absolutely.
and really high quality people. Especially there's and I think this is, everyone needs good staff. I mean, that's always something that we want. But I think for African American community especially, people are always looking to move. I mean, and I say even more so than say other communities. If you're Black and if you're from Milwaukee, you're really thinking about getting out of here and going somewhere else. I mean, that is just a consistent thing amongst like young men and young women who are like, who have really good quality skills. They're thinking about, like, once upon a time it was more Atlanta, now it's probably more Texas, and this is just so much more true than I think amongst, say, like other communities who feel like as professionals they can find a place here. They can establish themselves, feel pretty good somewhere in Brookfield or whatever else. And for a lot of Black families, that's just not what they're looking. It's just not. They don't have that comfort. They don't have even those positions sometimes in this community. And so, just trying to find a way to like keep staff, even if you're training, even if you're putting into somebody, then it's like, just so many more sometimes opportunities other places. Right.
One thing that, I was gonna just kind of thinking about that when we say like the general community versus the general Muslim community. So there's this, I think, inappropriate sense of like ownership of like what is ownership, and this idea of the standard of what's considered normal or what's considered general, right? And oftentimes Black people do not fit that. And so when you think about like the idea of racism, racism is a social construct, right? It's not anything that's genetic race itself is a social construct. And so unfortunately, the same types of experiences that I've had in the general community, even though we're, the majority of people who are here, right? The majority of people in Milwaukee, the majority of people on the globe are melanated, right? But we're still considered like something that's different or not, or other, not the general, not the standard. So for me, my experience in Islam, unfortunately, I don't think I actually understood I was actually Black until I was in the Islamic community. Mm-hmm. When I was about 6 or 7 years old, and this is so unfortunate because my grandparents were some of the founders of the of ISM here in Milwaukee, right? So like my grandfather, back in the 40s, 50s, when he came to Milwaukee, had a rooming house, rented it out. There were other immigrants who came here. And then the first masjid outside of Temple Number 3, which was here in 1933 or so, was in my grandparents' living room, okay? And so many people don't realize that, yet when I'm 6 years old and I go to an Eid celebration, I was so excited because, I got this Barbie. It was like Superstar Christy Barbie, and she was brown, and she had this glorious hair and this sparkly dress. And I go into the masjid, and the girls are like, oh my God, she's so ugly, and all of these kind of terrible things, and started calling her names. And these are the girls who are Muslim and who are supposed to be my peers. So the first experience of racism that I had was not at school. It was not in the community. It was in prayer, So I can think of countless times going to Islamic camps, and even like I have 2 of my children in the back now. I had to be very mindful about choosing not to send them to an Islamic high school, because I did not want them to experience the same type of racism that I experienced growing up here in this community, and that I still see. I paid for them to go to Pius, which is Catholic, and then just made sure that they were at they had other experiences, unfortunately. So like those are the types of things, like as a parent, that I've had to consider because of the extreme racism that unfortunately perpetuates the Muslim community here. The other thing that I would like to say though about that is when you think about other things that impact, like in terms of structural racism, so I'm like a health geek, right? So I always think about like in Milwaukee, we know that on average Black people die 14 years earlier than their white counterparts. There's something systemic that's driving that. And so kind of going back to that story about my grandfather, so at the time, this was in like the 50s or 40s or 50s, half the rooming house no longer exists. Why does it no longer exist? Because there's Highway 43 that now occupies that space because of urban renewal. There were other families who came in during that time, and more started to come in the 70s and 80s, immigrant families. They were able to kind of cross that line to the south side and buy homes and all of that. My family wasn't able to do that because of redlining and other, systemic oppression that they experienced. I mean, we couldn't even move to Wauwatosa until the 1980s. So there are all these different things that other people were able to kind of come in and experience that are still, to my brother's point about people wanting to get out of here, because I mean, it's still not the best place to live here. There's still a whole lot of racism structurally and even, interpersonally that people are experiencing. And so, unfortunately, I wish I could say that things were very different and that when I'm coming to a spiritual home, it's a safe place, but unfortunately, it has not been.
Just to kind of lend on to that, now I'm sitting here listening to the responses, but at the same time, I'm looking at the audience as well. And I have to say, this is a very beautiful audience. It's very diverse, very multi-range, if you will. And I'm saying that, one, because it's visually appealing to me, but at the same time, I'm also saying that because as a student of our history, a history of Islam in America, and specifically with our experience of Islam in America, starting in Detroit, Chicago, Milwaukee, these were very central places. These are very, very important and historical places for the establishment of Islam in America. And I want us please to understand that though there were pockets of Muslims in other states in the United States of America, Iowa and other places, as far as Islam taking a foothold and making an imprint in the United States of America, that imprint started in these three cities: Detroit, Chicago, and Milwaukee. And many of you all in here are people who live that experience. So we're talking about it from perhaps a book perspective or perhaps family perspective, etc. But some of you all in here, you actually lived that, you experienced it. And so all of that is to say that though we knew and know that racism, systemic racism, and other forms of oppression or what have you existed, what stood out for us was that regardless of all of that, we knew that that existed, but regardless of all of that, we were going to do something for our own. We were going to do something for ourselves. That's not something that's foreign to what other people do in the United States of America. Jewish people do it. The Irish do it. The Native Americans do it. They have their own school. In fact, I don't think you can even get into their school unless you can prove Native American ancestry. We have different Islamic centers in the city of Milwaukee that reflect the different ethnicities. You have the Masjid al-Mubarak with the Rohingya Islamic Center, etc. So we come out of an experience where we said, regardless of all of that, we were going to do something for our own. We were going to establish our own life, our own discipline, our own religion, our own business endeavors, our own homes, etc. And so with me coming into this religion at a very young age, I was 12 years old. No one forced me into the religion. I came in on my own. 12. I don't know, but I was 12. And in my years, there were certain people that was there. And I can't account for this. I have to believe, and in fact, I know that it was Allah himself that was guiding me in this direction. There were people that God put in my life to get me to where I'm at right now, and I'm sure we can all attest to that. And so in taking that journey and that path to where I am now, what I have seen as a struggle for my life personally and for our life generally, collectively, is that somehow our group of Muslims who are African Americans, I like this term Muslim African American, it's just what I prefer, but somehow we have weakened on that passion, on that urgency in us. And perhaps it's kind of the same thing, or perhaps it's similar to what happened with the general population of African Americans. Because of the segregation, etc., we had no choice but to stick together. But once integration happened, we said, I'm going across the bridge. I'm gone. See you later. We left. But that also weakened us in so many other ways. It weakened us socially, it weakened us economically, it weakened us politically, etc. So here we are now, Muslims, and in our experience of coming into Islam in the peculiar way that we did through the Nation of Islam, Professor Farad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, etc., coming through the religion that way, and once we got to a position where we felt like we know the religion now, we have it properly, or what have you, it's almost like that idea or that urgency in us to still want to have our own kind of weekend. At least that's what it seems like here in the city of Milwaukee. Last thing I'll say, and I'll stop. I'm rambling. I don't want to ramble here. Just as segregated as the city of Milwaukee is, I believe that Milwaukee is perhaps one of the most segregated cities in the United States of America, if not the most segregated city in the United States of America. I would also have to say, to that extent, that what I've seen since I've been here is that on a large scale, our Muslim community is segregated, highly segregated. And I wish, as an imam, from the perspective as an imam, that the various Muslim communities would do more things collaboratively. And if there are pockets of people who are doing things collaboratively, then to include everybody. Because just like that racism that you spoke about among the African Americans who are Muslims, we feel it every time that there's collaborative work in the city of Milwaukee done, and we're not included, or we're not even respected by even having sitting at the table, right? It's something to deal with, and it's there, and it should be the elephant in the room that I have to point a finger to.
And you kind of jumped ahead, which is good, because we're going to stay on that path of what could other Muslims do to kind of better support you all in your comfort amongst Black Muslims. What could be done?
I think, realistically speaking, I really do believe that the big charge is not so much what others could do for us, but what we could do for ourselves. We have, among Muslims who are African Americans, we have a change that we went through. And I mean, we could explain that change if we have time. But we went through a change in the 70s and the 80s and in the 90s, especially here in the city of Milwaukee. We went through a change, and we had things that happened that was good and a lot of things that happened that was not good. And it left an effect on some people. And it left pain, it left hurt, it left a lot of unresolved issues. It left a lot of people feeling like, I'm gonna leave and go over here and we're gonna establish what we wanna establish over here. So for us, I think what we need to do is, as far as Muslims who are African Americans, try to rebuild those bonds back. We have various facilities here in the city of Milwaukee. Connect, establish those bonds of those social bonds, etc. As far as others outside of us who are not African American, who are at other masjids or other facilities, let me say this part. We're not looking for handouts. We're not looking for people to give us something that we can't do for ourselves. I want to be very clear on that part. Though we are not the most wealthy people, and sometimes we're small in numbers, we do have integrity and dignity. But what I would like to see that other people could do outside of us is work more collaboratively with us. Work with our Claire Muhammad School. Don't be like that father who doesn't spend time with their child and just gives, here's $100, son, I'll see you next year. Don't do that. Be with us. Come, socialize, come visit, talk, establish relations, bonds, etc. Muhammad the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Muhammad the Prophet said, that if you give the greetings to a believer, assalamu alaikum, and he gives you the greeting back, don't say that that person's not Muslim. What Islam is in the heart of the person. A lot of times what we have a tendency to do is say, who is not Muslim, who is Muslim? That's not your job. That's not your job. You just be the best believer that you can. In fact, the Quran doesn't even really call us Muslims that much. It's always believers, mu'min. That's the preference term right there. So if we're people of faith, then let's demonstrate that faith in our love and our brotherhood to each other and for each other.
Well, he didn't mean we don't accept donations.
I certainly didn't mean that. We're not turning down that money now. That's
Good fundraising organizations, right? I think I agree with most of everything was saying. I think though that everything isn't us though. I feel like a lot of. I remember another panel. I think I was on with my sister maybe, and she was talking about. And we've mentioned systemic racism a couple times, and I think systemic racism is something that we sort of like to talk about more in a modern context. But I really feel like part of that is it feels less threatening. I feel like all racism is interpersonal racism. I feel like that's really the root of so much. If I can talk about systemic racism, it lets me say that the system is racist. It's not me. It's like the system is racist, and that's been the problem. It's not the personal discussions we have at our dinner table. It's not about the way that we discuss people amongst each other, and that to me is a challenge and something that we really need to culturally change. There's a lot of people who, if you heard someone talk about Palestine and these people are thugs and look at their criminality and someone in Palestine talking about this, they would immediately be like, well, look at the situation. They'd be like, well, look what these people have been through. Look at the oppression that people are putting them under. Look at the lack of resources that they have. The only reason why you're calling them all these things is because you don't necessarily know their situation. But a similar person could come by here and they could own a store and they look out and they could say, oh, look at these thugs, look at their criminality, look at how these people are acting. So there's this way that you frequently that people's stories are portrayed as different. There also is the way that I would say the Black story is told in various narratives. If all you've seen of Black people is BET, and this is what you've been sold and this is even amongst Africans. When you talk about African Americans, they'll see people and be like, oh, well, these them over there, if they would just work a little harder, if they I came over and I didn't have much and I did so much, why in their neighborhoods aren't they doing more? Instead of looking at the situation holistically. So I feel when you talk about social context, I feel like having connections to people is such an important ideal. If you're not socializing, if you're not also even amongst groups by themselves, how you socialize your children. If there's an idea that these people are less than in some way. And even when it comes to donating, feeling some issue of superiority as opposed to feeling that this is sharing, that this is us uplifting each other, that this is us helping those unfortunate people over there. So to minimize these distances, I feel is just really important for us to understand our shared humanity in our stories, that you're not that humans people where we try for certain things, and when under oppression we tend to see similar outcomes. This is something that frequently I feel that we just don't have enough of. Too much it's an idea that there's a narrative amongst that's pushed from the media, that's pushed with so much of what we even call Black culture nowadays. I mean, if I, again, music, if I see like a lot of modern music, if I see a lot of modern TV shows and what they say about like a child's worth, if I was to write a song about other like social groups who are like more beloved by the media nowadays, your song would not be played on the radio. Write a song about killing Black kids. Write a song about killing Black men, and you will get as much playtime as you want. And these are, and yeah, we could say that these are structural racism issues, but these are interpersonal things also. These are people's personal ideas about the value of Black life, about the value of Black people, and what's acceptable for us. And I feel like these are things that like we have to consistently, and not just all children are born not racist, because that's not necessarily true. I mean, babies can be actually pretty racist at times. That's the thing, right? So, that's the thing, right? They grow up, right? And they look at somebody, and they'll be like, hey, he looks a little more like me. I guess we're on the same team, you know? You have to actively teach things. You can't just be like, oh, it's gonna work it out. We don't believe, as long as we don't talk about racism, it's gonna work itself out. No, you have to actively teach. You have to develop. You have to nurture. And this is right. So, I mean, this is a job for all of us. This isn't just like, hey, Black Muslims, solve our racist issues. This is also this question of what, for all of us trying to, progress and move forward and, have a more unified and stronger community, especially amongst Muslims, I feel, and this is a thing amongst all humans, period, but especially amongst Muslims. I mean, we're told that we're supposed to, be close to each other. And this doesn't mean, again, that I like diversity. It's interesting when I watch like African kids quote Japanese animation, and it makes me sort of like wonder, right, about like your culture, your ideals, what you're trying to, what you find that's important. But it's there's also, so even though each of us, we're diverse, we're different, we have our own cultures, to also have an understanding that there's not some superiority of someone's culture. There's not a superiority especially there's not a superiority of your Islam because of your culture.
Of your what?
Of your Islam.
Oh.
So, I mean, there's this idea, right? There's sometimes this amalgamation of Islam and, say, Daisy culture or Arab culture or whatever else. And this is not Islam. I mean, Dr. Wahid will talk about like how you dress and other things like that. That could be your culture, but as long as you're following, the certain guidelines of Islam, there's a ton of ways that you could express culture, and still, all of this is Islamic culture. So these are things I'm consistently concerned with for myself, for my children, for my community. And it's and I feel like I feel like this is something that, I'm glad we're having this discussion. I'm glad we have discussions like this. I feel like we shouldn't just have them in Black History Month or whatever else like that, that this is a consistent work that we all need to be doing.
If
No, sir.
That's right.
So I had a question.
Just
comment
one.
about something. Were you gonna do that?
Yeah, I got one more question for them, and then I'm gonna open it up to the floor. Just make sure that we stay on time.
Can I just add a couple
Yeah.
things here real quick here? Let me just add a couple of things here real quick. Many of y'all in this room perhaps know of or heard of Malcolm X. You perhaps know of him more if you do the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, or even the one who taught him, Professor Farad. We should spend some time with trying to inform people about that history or that experience, so that you will understand how we got to where we are now and how we arrived to the plethora of different cultures in the United States of America now that can freely call themselves Muslims. Because years ago, you couldn't do that. But let me mention this here. This term black Muslim, I'm looking at this book, Black in America, Black Muslims, etc. I do want us to understand and know that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he did not come up with this term Black Muslim. That wasn't something that he pushed. That wasn't the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's thing, black. What the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was giving us was our true religion, which was Islam. And so for us, he was giving us our Islamic life, our Muslim life. We have some pioneers here, and they know this, and we have others that are here that know that. So I want us to understand this term Black Muslims, etc. That's something that I thought I heard my sister Basima mention. An academic scholar came up with, Dr. Eric C. Lincoln. C. Eric Lincoln. Thank you. C. Eric Lincoln. C. Eric Lincoln. He put that term out in the air. But for us, it was a religion that brought us back to our own identity, our own self. We were a righteous Muslim, and that's what we wanted to be. That's what we were coming to the religion for, to be a righteous Muslim. That's what we wanted to be. Now, as far as Black culture, concerning African Americans or Black people, we were completely robbed of that, stripped of that. This is something that we all know. Okay? Study the history. We know the story. We had many of us who are African Americans, perhaps, unless you did Ancestry.com or AfricanAncestry.com or whatever, perhaps don't even know who our grandparents or great-grandparents are, and certainly not some of the languages that we spoke or speak of. Many of us, the names that we have don't even reflect any type of cultural life that we come from. So for us, when we got Islam presented to us by way of Professor Farad, to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, to us, when we got it, we saw ourselves as a completely new people. We had no connections to the continent of Africa. All of that came later. All of that came in the 70s, 60s, and 70s and 80s with the Black Power movement and struggle and the dashikis and the afros and all of that. And all of that came later. But prior to that, we had really no connection to even having a correct concept of what Africa was about. So when we got al-Islam, or I should say when we got Islam, I'm not going to say al-Islam. When we got Islam, we were coming into a completely new life, and that's what we were looking for. So the black that we have now, that's later. That came on as an adjective later. But please, let's understand that what we saw ourselves coming into was not this social construct of black or blackness now. We were coming to what we saw was what God wanted us to come to, and that's Islam, to be a righteous Muslim. That's what we were coming to.
Can I add to that really quickly?
Absolutely.
So actually, there's this one sister. Her name is Dr. Donna Austin, and she's a Muslim woman researcher out of New Jersey. And just to kind of add to your point, one of the things that she talks about, and I love this quote, she talks about how the Nation of Islam and later Imam Worthy Muhammad, their contribution has been this process of decolonization of spirituality, right? So, and I thought that was such a powerful statement, because what she talked about is this was the first time that Black people's belief of their inferiority, of their inherent inferiority, was eliminated so that they could more fully embrace their connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so if you think about that, many of us here, and you say the larger general Muslim community, there's influence of this caste-based systems and colonialism and tribalism and all of these other things. And as my brother was saying, that has kind of just been melded within Islam, and then that is what was many people still seek to kind of impose that upon people who already had that sense of what Islam was. You know, like I think my grandmother is 94, and she talks about when she was about 5 years old, there would be women who would go out into the fields, because she was in Mississippi, and they would be out there at the crack of dawn, like going through these prayer motions. So we still had these things and this connection to Allah, but we had to hide it. You know, and so she talks about that, how we had to hide it. It wasn't something that we could do. And so how, you know, we have to be very mindful of what that was like to be able to rid ourselves of that inferiority or that internalized oppression that we ended up adopting because of the external oppression that we experienced. One of the other things that I'd like to just mention is how people here, I think the initial question is like, what can other Muslims do to best support Black Muslims in their struggles? Is to acknowledge the fact that you are here and you are thriving and becoming rich on the backs of Blacks. And so I would like you to ask yourself, how are you participating in the oppression of Black people? When you're coming into neighborhoods and you open a store. So I see, and I kind of want to acknowledge some of the brothers here, Minister William Muhammad here, and Brother David Muhammad, who's actually my boss. So maybe I should be kind of, but he's also, you know, definitely an advocate to try to improve the lives of people who are here locally and then also nationally. But if you think about that, when David and I, we worked at the health department, and we would actually look to see like, well, where do we see concentrations of crime? Where do we see concentrations of violence, right? So if you think in a neighborhood, they say, it's around liquor stores. It's around these other places, okay? So if we're Muslims, and we know that the majority of liquor stores and these other predatory businesses are run by Muslims, you have the responsibility to tell people that that is unacceptable. It's unacceptable. You cannot come here and thrive off of the backs and the hurt and the pain of people who are already depressed. They've already experienced divestment in their neighborhoods. And then you come in and you say, well, there's crime that goes around my store, because you're contributing to it. You're bringing it there. You know, and so that's the thing. It's like this sense of not taking accountability for, you know, like how you're negatively contributing to the oppression. So that would be one of the main things. And I know there's even some organizations locally who they're struggling financially because they refuse to take any donations from people who are getting their businesses in a haram way, right? So we can't say that one thing is haram, but this other thing is like, you know, my son is back here and he has locks, right? And so some people may look at him and say, oh yeah, well, you know, and if this actually has happened, you know, are locks haram? How could they possibly be? You know, so another thing to take into consideration is, do you know of other Black and African Muslim scholars or sheikhs, right? Do you know like at least 5 or 10? There's many. You know, do you acknowledge that much of the fiqh or the fatwas that are oftentimes passed are culturally biased and are automatically saying that what I believe in my own culture is, you know, haram. You know, so we have to be mindful of how we're getting our language and the interpretations of Islam, and how that is influenced by, again, the caste-based systems, colonialism, and tribalism. And none of those, and Islam came to rid us of those things. So that's the last thing that I guess I'll say about that.
How about you, young lady?
I'm fine.
Oh, come on.
They've said enough.
Well, our last question before we open up the floor to questions.
Can I say one more thing about
Can we
that?
have
That's just-
Sister Basima?
Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah,
we've
say
heard you.
something, huh?
Huh?
Well, the only thing that it made me think about was understanding the movement from the Nation of Islam to what Imam brought us to. He said, my father came to empty out vessels because they had put so much into us that was not being human. He said, my job is to make you human. And that's what Islam came to do, was make everybody human, because we didn't know what a human being is. I think about that all the time when we talk about, if I was a farmer, or if I had an apple orchard, I'd know everything I needed to know about that crop in order to make it the best crop. But our teachers are not taught what a human being is, so how do they teach? They are not teaching. They train us to continue doing what they're doing. You can even look at politics now, how DeSantis is gonna take any book that tells people about the truth. Oh, we don't wanna hear the truth. They're lying on us, trying to make us hate ourselves. But it's okay for us to hate ourselves. That's okay. But yeah, that and C. Eric Lincoln saying the reason Islam was popular in the African American community, he felt in his research, is there was a genetic memory of Islam. And that's why it appealed to us. And I remember studying this bishop who talked to the leaders when they had that movement going back to Freetown in Sierra Leone. And he said, why didn't your leaders bring Islam to your people? He was talking about the black leaders in America who were trying to uplift the race. He said, I see you trying to uplift the race. He said, why did you stay in Christianity? Because Christianity is an oppressive religion to people of color. He said, why didn't you try Islam? I just thought that was interesting. Back in the 1800s, they're saying, try Islam, but nobody tried it. So I just thought that was interesting.
All right, well, our last question is just, we've talked about some of the issues, the milestones, the struggles, but what makes you proud to be a black Muslim, or Muslim period?
Do you know what we had to go through to become Muslim in this country? That's to be proud of. And even with feeling, because we feel racism within the Muslim community also. I mean, there's no need of pussyfooting on that one. But even with that, even with dealing with, oh, you're not a real Muslim because you didn't come from a real Muslim country, or you don't have the language down enough to really understand the religion. But what we do have is the heart of a believer to want to know. So Allah is blessing us anyway, and we have a different perspective, because I am not caught up, I don't think any of us are caught up in cultural rituals that cloud our vision of what Islam really is. And we can take it and not feel, I don't think there's anybody who can out-Islam me in terms of understanding what Allah wants for us and what we can do. And like he was saying, all we need is just fairness. That's all we want, just fairness. You don't have to kiss our butt. We not wanting anybody to bow down to us. Oh, you poor blacks, you're so much better than we are. It's not even about that, because every culture has had oppression. This devil has gone all the way around the world and pitted all of us against each other. We can just look at the Civil War. I was trained to give intelligence exams, and for my study, I had to give administer the test to 20 different people, and they different ages, African American. And every African American, when the question was, who was the president for civil rights? Every one of them said Lincoln, because all they heard was civil, and they thought war. And every one of them got that wrong until I mentioned it at the end of the test. I gave them credit for it because I knew what they meant. But every one of them said Kennedy, because for us, in this time, that was our Civil War. It wasn't the one back earlier, but even look at what the leadership did to the poor Caucasians down south. They put the blacks over them, and they kept the military in, so that the animosity between the two people, that the South would never be able to rise up again. Because as soon as they withdrew, all they did was do everything they could to keep us down. So in trying to keep somebody else down, that stifles you. Cause you gotta stand there and hold on to me, so how much movement you doing if you holding me down? So it hasn't changed. It's gotten a little more sophisticated. I kinda like, what did, he was at Rosa Parks' eulogy and he said, we don't deal with Jim Crow, we have James Esquire Jr. He's all technology
Yeah, all
with his
technology.
racism.
Yeah. I would say, personally, what makes me proud to be a Muslim is being able to be with people physically who actually came through this experience that I read about. I read, and that's all I did was read. 14, 15, 16. When I turned 16 for my birthday gift, I bought books. So I was just an avid reader. But everything that I read about in books, to be with people who actually came through that experience, for me, is truly humbling. Having people like Imam Shahid Abdul Ghani take me across this country with him, and meeting people like Clyde Rahman, meeting other people who were pioneers, Muhammad Sadiq, who was a person who taught Islam to Mike Tyson. These are people that I know, and I sat with them and I talked with them. I never met Malcolm X before, but I've sat with people who know Malcolm X. I mean, these sisters I believe have met Malcolm X at one point in time. And certainly the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I mean, sat in the company of Sister Claire Muhammad, these two sisters right here. So just to be among them is truly humbling, with all of the believers that here. On a larger scale, what I am, I don't know if I would say, I guess we could say proud about, is how Allah, I know this, I have faith, but I know this, Allah has blessed the African American for our sincerity. And even though we didn't have Islam proper, or Islam in the correct idea or context, etc., or sense, that was Allah giving us what we had to get so that we could get to where we needed to go. And for us to get Islam in that way is humbling, because just like Bilal, when Bilal was being oppressed under the Arabs at that time, and Abu Bakr paid for his freedom, and he had to ask the question, are you freeing me now to be your slave? That's what Bilal asked. That could have happened to the large group of African Americans. Someone could have easily came in and did certain things for us, and then we could have been, instead of being under white folks' oppressions or Caucasian oppression, white man's rule or what have you, we could have been under somebody else's rule. But Allah didn't want that. So that's something to consider, that history, the way that we have Islam now, is reparations couldn't even meet that. And we can ask for reparations, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't get it. Everybody else got it. We understand that. But what kind of reparations could white America give to us? What kind of reparations could white America give us better than what we have in regards to Al-Islam? It couldn't. So that's something to be, the history, the experience, all of that is very, very special, is very, very important. And for those of us who don't know it, you should study it. It's miraculous. If you study it, you have asked the question, how in the world could this have happened? And they survived and got to Islam the way that they have it. It's mind-boggling. If it wasn't for Allah, it wouldn't have even happened. It's that serious. So yes, it's very special, very important, very special. I'm very proud of that.
When I read this question, I was like, oh, that's interesting. So it's like, again, I probably look back to when I was younger. I was another interesting facet of like my childhood growing up was the fact that we were Muslim at a time where there was like, you know, Ahmadiyya was like would go back and forth, and you know there'd be debates. You know, I would like stomp kids if they said something, not like literally, but like right. So, but like let someone say something about Christmas or whatever else, and they'd be like, so, what do you know about that? I mean, I was raised with a real sort of hatred of ignorance. I was raised with a real love for reading, love for your Islam as your Islam, not necessarily as a cultural ideal, because I didn't necessarily feel like other people's cultures. And then, so our Islam was the most important thing to us, you know, that you were Muslim, and that when other people would say things, you'd expect to be able to respond. You'd expect to be able to deal with the situation. I remember meeting a brother who was from another country, and he came here and he's like, I just can't fast when I'm in America. He's like, man, it's weird, you know? There's food everywhere. And it's just like, And I just felt that was like, you know, like, it's just sort of weird. Because we're sort of used to being at a point where if other people are against me, if I feel like you're instead of feeling like oh, you're a minority and oh, there's only so few of you, I feel like I'm in a target-rich environment where I got a lot of things that I can work with. I got a lot of things that I can try to help with. And even I talk about like leaving versus being in a place that may have more problems. It's sort of I feel sort of proud. I feel proud to be in a position where there are problems, because what else am I here for besides to try to help with issues and try to do more good and to try to, you know, establish places for Muslims to have a greater impact on society.
So for me, I'm just really simple. I'm just very proud of, I think, what this room represents. We have a very diverse, very like many ways of being able to practice and worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so I think that definitely is represented here, you know. And so just being a part of this globally, this global group that is all seeking to be closer to Allah, seeking to do better, is something that I'm proud of, and that I'm very grateful that Allah chose us to be Muslim. So, let's see.